When both you and the narcissist fall into silence, the world does not settle down. It shakes because in that still moment, someone finally loses control, and that person is not you. Most people assume that when both sides stop talking, the story has ended, but the truth is much more unsettling. This is the point where the narcissist begins their real psychological unraveling and where your real healing starts. Stay with me because what happens next is the part no one warns you about. If this already feels too familiar, keep listening. You need to understand the emotional ground you are stepping onto because knowing this is how you break the entire pattern for good. Let's go deeper. When both you and the narcissist stop communicating, the first thing that happens for them is something I call the recalibration phase. It is subtle, it is internal, and most people do not notice it because it happens quietly, long before the narcissist makes any visible move. When you go silent, you feel it as a shift in your emotions, a boundary, a small step toward healing. But the narcissist does not see your silence that way. They take it as information. Your lack of response becomes something they must decode, not something they honor. They start to study how they lost their grip, not how they damaged you. Narcissists do not self-reflect the way healthy people do. Instead, they start analyzing, did you get distracted? Are you trying to punish them? Did someone else enter your life? Are you testing them? They look for the angle, the intention, the possible threat. Your silence becomes a puzzle that unsettles them because uncertainty weakens their imagined power. During this recalibration phase, they may not contact you at all. In fact, their quiet is not because they don't care, it is because they are planning. They might check your social media, monitor your activity, look at who interacts with you, or keep tabs on your circle. They are collecting information, waiting for your next emotional move. Narcissists strongly believe that anyone they once controlled will eventually return. So to them, your silence is not closure. It is temporary rebellion. That is why they do not panic immediately. Instead, they wait, assuming you will break the silence first, just like you have before. They depend on the habits they built inside you, the guilt, the fear of conflict, the desire to keep peace. They expect you to bend. When you don't, their recalibration becomes more intense. They start wondering whether their influence is fading, and that is when the threat becomes real for them. Silence in their world is never neutral. It is either a chance to regain control or a danger to their ego. And the longer you stay quiet, the more they feel the ground shaking underneath them because your silence breaks the power structure they thought they controlled. When both sides go silent, the emotional experience looks completely different for you than for the narcissist. This difference shows a hard truth. You feel the loss, but they feel the inconvenience. When you stop reaching out, you carry the whole emotional weight, the hurt, the broken trust, the confusion, and the exhaustion. You may feel sadness, withdrawal, guilt, loneliness, or even fear. You are grieving not just the relationship, but the version of yourself who tolerated so much pain. Your silence comes from emotional overflow. You have reached a point where your mind and body cannot tolerate any more chaos. You are trying to recover your space, your self-respect, and your clarity. That internal struggle is heavy. It affects your sleep, your memories, your confidence, and your sense of self. Meanwhile, the narcissist does not experience silence with emotional depth. They do not sit with the loss the way you do. They do not reflect on what went wrong or how they hurt you. Instead, their first reaction is irritation. Your silence interrupts their routine, not their heart. They are used to having access to your energy, your attention, your reactions, your apologies, and even your arguments. All of this fed their sense of importance. When you stop responding, that supply stops flowing. That doesn't break them emotionally, it simply frustrates them. They experience the loss of your attention the same way someone experiences losing access to something they were used to: a delay, an inconvenience, a disruption. They are not thinking, I lost someone meaningful. They are thinking, why aren't they giving me attention? Your pain and their irritation live in two different emotional worlds. You are mourning the relationship while they are simply adjusting to the lack of control. You are trying to rebuild yourself while they are thinking about how your silence affects their ego. You feel the emptiness. They feel the interruption. As time passes, this imbalance becomes even clearer. You begin to understand how heavy the emotional load was and how much you silenced yourself to keep peace. They begin to wonder why something that used to work, your emotional response, suddenly stopped working. Your silence pushes you into deeper reflection, while it pushes them into entitlement and annoyance. The emotional weight you carry is huge, while the discomfort they feel is tied not to losing you, but to losing the convenience of your compliance. When both sides go silent, the narcissist does not see that quiet moment as a neutral pause. They see it as a direct threat to their ego because silence from someone they once controlled feels like rebellion. The narcissist views relationships through control, not connection. So when you stop responding, stop reaching out, and stop giving them attention, you disrupt the psychological ladder they believe they built. They see your silence as defiance, even if your only intention is to find peace. In their mind, silence is never calm. It is resistance. It is disrespect. It is proof that their power might be slipping. This is why silence affects them more than arguments ever could. Arguments keep them relevant. Reactivity feeds their ego. Even your anger tells them they still matter. But silence removes them from the center of your world, and that absence threatens the fragile identity they depend on. Your silence forces them to face the possibility that they are not as important or dominant as they imagined. Narcissists cannot stand uncertainty, and your quiet creates exactly that, a space they cannot control. Instead of seeing your silence as a healthy boundary, they see it as a challenge. This is where their thoughts twist. They start telling themselves you are being disrespectful, ungrateful, dramatic, or manipulative. They believe your silence is a tactic, not a sign of exhaustion. Some narcissists shift into a competitive mindset, seeing the silence as a battle they must win. Others see it as betrayal, convincing themselves you abandoned them, even if they mistreated you for months or years. They rewrite the meaning of your silence not to understand you, but to protect themselves. As this tension builds, their need for control starts to crack. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their insecurity. Instead of facing that insecurity, they create stories in their mind that restore their sense of superiority. They might assume you will eventually return because you always have, or they may plan ways to punish you emotionally for not following their script. In their world, silence is a warning sign because it suggests something they do not want to accept. They may no longer control you. When both you and the narcissist pull back into silence, it may appear from the outside that nothing is happening, but inside, the narcissist starts moving through a very predictable set of reactions designed to restore their feeling of dominance. One of the most common responses is their attempt to fill the space your absence created. They do this in different ways, sometimes by distracting themselves with new people, sometimes by seeking attention elsewhere, and sometimes by convincing themselves you will eventually return. They try to rebuild the sense of power your silence took away. They may try to boost their ego through other sources, pretend they don't care, or act as if they never needed you. But behind all of that, the silence you created still bothers them, still follows them, and still threatens the image they built of themselves. And while they try to cover that discomfort, something very different is happening on your side. You are slowly reclaiming your mind, your voice, and your peace. Your silence is not a game. It is protection. It is healing. It is the first step toward freedom. Through hoovering, baiting, or triangulation, the narcissist tries to pull your attention back. These actions are not random or accidental. They are psychological strategies the narcissist uses when they sense their grip on you weakening. Hoovering begins the moment they realize your silence is not just a short break. At first, they assume you will come back on your own because that is the pattern they trained you into. When you stay quiet longer than they expected, a small panic begins to form inside them. Hoovering is their way of trying to draw you back into the same cycle, not because they genuinely care for you, but because losing you threatens the fragile structure of their ego. They may send a soft message, a warm memory, or a dramatic message asking for help. They might look sorry, thoughtful, or suddenly very loving. They change their tone quickly depending on what they think will affect you. Their true purpose is not reconnection. Their real goal is to put you back in the position where they feel powerful and in control again. If hoovering does not work or feels like too much of a risk for their pride, they move to baiting. Baiting is meant to pull an emotional reaction out of you. It does not matter to them whether the reaction is happy, angry, sad, jealous, or frustrated. All that matters is that the reaction comes from you. They want to feel that they still have influence over your emotions. They might post something online to make you jealous, send a cold or rude message to upset you, or create unnecessary drama to force you to respond. Even a negative reaction from you makes them feel important again. Silence takes away their sense of power, so baiting becomes their way of poking at the emotional wounds they caused, hoping you will respond enough to show them you are still available to them in some way. When neither hoovering nor baiting works, they raise the intensity by using triangulation. This is when they involve someone else, an ex, a new partner, a friend, a family member, not for real connection, but to create a story that puts them back in the position of control. They might show off a new relationship, suggest that someone else treats them better, or exaggerate your silence to make themselves look like the victim. The whole intention behind triangulation is to make you feel pushed aside, insecure, or easily replaceable. They want to pull you into defending yourself, defending your worth, or trying to reestablish your place in their life. These behaviors are not signs of love. They are signs of dependence. The narcissist depends on outside emotional supply to feel like they exist. When you take that supply away, they scramble to fill the hole. Hoovering, baiting, and triangulation are methods they use to regain psychological dominance, not emotional closeness. Their reactions come from fear, entitlement, and the disruption of their ego, all set off by your silence. As the silence continues on both sides, something deep begins to shift, and it is something most people do not expect. While you may see the silence as a step toward peace or closure, the narcissist sees the silence as growing danger. Your quiet does not feel like calm to them. It feels like a loss of control. Their sense of identity relies on the reactions of others, especially reactions from people they once pulled tightly into their world. When your response disappears, it sets off an internal alarm. For them, your silence is not peaceful. It represents a threat. Narcissists need emotional stimulation to keep their unsteady self-esteem standing. They need attention, admiration, conflict, chaos, anything that places them at the center of someone else's emotional focus. When you stop providing that attention, they begin to feel like their inner world is collapsing. They cannot regulate their emotions without someone else reflecting them back. Your silence takes away that reflection, creating a psychological chain reaction. At first, they pretend your silence means nothing. They might act calm, distant, or act like they don't care at all. But this is only a mask. As time goes on, the quiet becomes impossible for them to ignore. Without your attention feeding their inflated self-image, they begin to feel small, unimportant, and unnoticed. These feelings are unbearable to them because they touch the core of their deepest fear, the fear of being ordinary, invisible, or meaningless. Meanwhile, you may be using the silence to rebuild yourself. You begin to breathe again. You start reclaiming parts of yourself that were buried under their demands and moods. You find clarity in the quiet while they find confusion and disorder. The difference becomes more noticeable as the silence continues. They may start overthinking, running old conversations in their mind, imagining what you might be thinking, or inventing explanations for why you are no longer reacting. The uncertainty eats at them. They do not miss you. They miss the mirror you provided. They miss the version of themselves they saw reflected in your reactions. Your silence brings you healing, but it brings them internal chaos. You start to feel whole again. They feel themselves tearing apart. The peace you find in the quiet becomes the same quiet that slowly unravels them. When the silence settles deeper on both sides, something begins to shift inside you, often slowly, sometimes confusingly, yet also with a surprising sense of relief. Your nervous system, which has been constantly alert throughout the relationship, finally gets a chance to stop expecting the next emotional hit. Narcissistic relationships put you in a state of constant alertness. You learn to predict their moods, their reactions, and the storms they create without warning. Your body becomes conditioned to expect tension even during moments that seem calm. So when the silence first arrives, your system does not relax right away. It does not yet understand that the danger has actually paused. You may feel restless, uneasy, or even guilty for the quiet. You may feel like something must be wrong simply because things are not exploding around you. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a natural response to long-term stress. Your body has been trained to live in survival mode, but as the quiet continues, something gentle begins to shift. The fog that once clouded your thinking starts to clear. You realize your thoughts change when you are no longer preparing for their next unpredictable reaction. Your sleep slowly improves. Your mind begins to breathe again. You start experiencing moments of stillness you almost forgot were possible. This is your nervous system beginning to reset. It is discovering that the constant danger, the constant tension is not there anymore. This is the start of real healing. Healing that does not need their apology, their explanation, or their closure. Healing that comes from finally having enough space to hear your own feelings and trust your own thoughts again. You begin reclaiming the emotional energy that was once drained by their needs, their outbursts, and their endless crises. You start remembering what it feels like to make decisions based on your